Hi, I'm Debbie.
I'm Caitlyn. Welcome to our new podcast, Dating at Her Age. Oh, she's dating at her age?
No. It's called Dating at Her Age. Oh, those poor things. We are launching into what Caitlyn has referred to as one of our most important episodes to date. DIY background checks for dating.
Yes.
Why do you call it our most important episode?
Because you need to research people, and I'm learning so much from you, and you're just a genius, and you're the best investigator ever. But it's a very important thing for safety. You don't know who you're talking to, and people can fool you so easily, and it's just so important to know the resources out there.
So I spent a big chunk of my career as a television news reporter and 10 years of that as an investigative television news reporter. And while I was an investigative reporter, I amassed a lot of websites that I could use that were super easy to access, low cost, easy to search. Some of them are free. So I could do fact checks for my stories that I was reporting on. I didn't really apply those websites much in the beginning of my dating life, starting to date post-divorce in my 50s. For this reason, I really wanted to separate doubtful Debbie from dating Debbie, I wanted to be hopeful. I wanted to think that the right guy was out there for me, and the right guy wouldn't require me to do some in-depth background check to figure out, does he have a criminal background? Does he have a host of bankruptcies? Does he pay his bills? Has he skated on child support and not paid for his kids? All things that, I believe in paying our debts. If you take out a loan, you pay it back. I believe in paying our taxes. I mean, that's just how the world works, right? I don't skate my taxes. I believe if we bring children into this world that we need to make sure we're paying our fair share to raise them, whether, we're in a marriage together, we're co-parenting, or we've been through a divorce. So all of these things became abundantly clear to me as I started on my dating journey. And I'm thinking, some of these men are not matching where I'm at morally when it comes to past choices, how I've lived my life, and they're making financial choices that I would never want or make in my own life. But they weren't being really clear with me about that, Caitlyn. And so as I got burned in my dating life, I recognized that I had the tools and the resources and the knowledge on how to do my DIY do-it-yourself background checks. I am not a private investigator. I am not
May as well be.
a police officer, but I'm not certified in anything.
Yeah.
These are just the tools, and I want to make that clear. These are the tools that I have used to learn about backgrounds of men that I'm dating that have helped me make decisions as to whether I want to continue to date them or not.
Yeah, and I mean, just listening to you there, you said you wanted to go into dating differently, like not, on guard. And people like me were like, oh, everyone's fine. There's no reason to worry. Everyone's good, because I feel like I'm good. I wouldn't do those things. So I've been so optimistic about people, and I can be really naive. And I'm just like, oh, you probably weren't a good person. And I didn't realize that. But then I'm learning things from you about this and these websites. I already use them sometimes just on anything, but it's very important. And I think that it's just so helpful to know these things. And I'm just really excited. I'm sure you're going to teach me more than I already even know. I don't even think I have it all.
I have some stories that I want to share with you. I know you have some stories. I have a story of when a woman also reached out to me because her boyfriend suddenly disappeared and she couldn't figure out where he was at. We're going to talk about those stories. And then I'm going to walk through many different websites I use, particularly to figure out if somebody has committed a crime, a significant crime. I'm not talking about jaywalking. I'm not talking about, they missed one payment on a credit card, back in 1995. I'm talking about a pattern of financial issues. I'm talking about criminal backgrounds that would be of concern to me if we were to create, a relationship and live in a long-term situation together. Mm-hmm. So that's what I'm talking about. So this isn't about, somebody got a speeding ticket for going 5 miles over the limit 10 years ago, and I'm going to hold them accountable next time we go on a coffee date. Now, this is about they're hiding something. I can sort of tell they're hiding something, and then I use these websites, and they often confirm, make note of this, what my gut has already told me. Mm-hmm. But by using these websites to search backgrounds, it confirms what my gut has already said. So it's just something that makes me recognize and remember that our gut tells us a lot about something. And I knowing all of these things in my, and how to research people, I still want to give them the benefit of the doubt.
Right. No, we all do. We all want to do that. And then you can even ask them about something and they can gaslight you into thinking that didn't happen. But when you have the receipts and can find it online or whatever, and there's record of it, that reassurance of just, you weren't crazy. You didn't have this inkling for no reason. I think that's really important, and trusting your gut is a very important thing. It's hard to do that when you have anxiety and you're just like, is this anxiety or is this a real feeling that I'm having? So
have you ever had a suspicion about somebody, or have had a friend tell you they suspect something is off with somebody?
I don't have direct, because I feel like I don't talk to people as much as my other friends do, but it's because of these reasons. But I had a friend who, she was dating this guy, and I had never met him or anything, but there were just a few kind of weird things about him, as like she really liked him and whatnot. But I think that he didn't have like a very secure job. I think he did like trading, like online trading or something like that during the day. He didn't have like a solid bank account. It was sports betting. Sorry, I forgot, online sports betting. And he had to like get money through money orders and stuff, like weird thing. There were red flags, and we're just kind of like, oh, when you see them from the surface level and your friend's telling you about this, I'm like, there's some issues with that. But sometimes people don't see it when they're right in front of you. And there were just a lot of details about his own life that I don't think she even knew, and she had been talking to for a while. So a simple Google search of his name, the Investigative Friends Unit, we found out that he, was on a registered sex offender, and he was on the most wanted list in a few different states for a crime that would put you on a registered sex offender list. So, and I think he's in prison now, but I'm just saying that was just a simple Google search, and it was free. Actually worse than like we thought. We were just kind of like, let's see what's going on with this guy. I don't know what's going on. Like it wasn't anything. He just had like weird things, like not tying things to his name. And
so the fact that there were some red flags, not necessarily deal breakers, but red flags, like can't quite figure out what he does for a living. What's going on?
Lacking details.
Don't quite know where his money's coming from. And curiosity led you to a free
Google, just Google.
Right, which I think is the best free tool that is often overlooked when we're trying to research people. We want to go to these fancy websites where we spend money doing it, when Google can open our eyes in a second. And that's exactly what you guys were able to figure out, is just by Googling this guy's name. And he gave your friend his real name.
Yeah, it was his real name, as far as, because
we wasn't trying to hide that.
And it was in a different state. So like using some of these statewide sites may not have even worked, because what we found was not in Utah. He gave a real name. We figured it out, and the friends did it because we were kind of red flags. We just wanted to know. And I think that, eventually she confronted him, and I think he kind of like played it off and manipulated her into thinking that it wasn't anything. And now I think he's arrested. I'm pretty sure that's what happened.
So she ran.
Yeah, she confronted it and then, cut it off. And
how was it? Do you remember? Do you know how they were connected?
A dating app, I'm pretty sure. I can verify that because this was a long time ago, like years ago, but I'm pretty sure it was through a dating app. Yeah.
It doesn't have to be either through a dating app. This could be through friends of friends of friends. The truth is, what I've learned in dating, and I've gone out with many men, many men, is they're all strangers. We didn't grow up together. They did not go to the same elementary school as we did, so we have no history. We don't know how they grew up, where they grew up. We don't know the skeletons in their, 13-year-old closet. We don't know what happened to them at 18. They can tell us whatever they want to tell us, whether it's on their dating profile, or it's over, the dating app chat, or it's over text, or it's during an in-person meetup. They can make up their resume. And what I mean by resume isn't necessarily their job resume. It's their life resume. Mm-hmm. And when we don't follow our gut like your friend did, we could end up in just a really negative situation.
Yeah, and it's just, I think it's so unfortunate that because we're always on edge when we're meeting new people, which is why dating is scary. And a lot of us are just like, I don't want to deal with that. That seems dangerous because there's so many stories out there. Like that one didn't end badly for her or anything, but it's just, there's so many stories that could end much worse based off of who you're associating with. And so it's important to know how to figure all that out, I guess.
One of the things dating at my age is I feel like we have a lot more baggage in our 50s because we've had a lot more opportunities and a lot more runway to mess things up. But
you can mess things up by 30 too.
You've made me realize that with that story.
There's a lot more though. Time to do that. So
right, it's not just one issue, and then the problems compound themselves through the decades. And so that is a fascinating story, and that was one of the sites that I have on my DIY background checklist is go to Google first. Always use Google. If you use Safari, I'm not picking one over the other, but use a public, search engine. It's free. I have actually found out by doing this that a man I was kind of temporarily seeing, just met him on a dating app. We went out a couple of times, but he had changed his last name. So you think, oh, that's no big deal. Well, when I went to Google him, his another name kind of popped up. Well, he'd had pretty profound troubles with the law several years ago, and this might not have mattered. I mean, we might have been able to work through this. I'm not, saying that something that he did, in his early 20s is something that you need to hang over his head forever and ever. Because now we're in our 50s. But I just thought, well, why wouldn't you gave me a different last name? Yeah. But it was sort of similar to his given name, but it was different enough that I had to question, is this the same person or is it not the same person? And then once I started reading the news articles that had been written about the allegations about him, I was like, this just doesn't sound like anything that I want to get mixed up with. I mean, I'm sure he's changed a million ways to Sunday, and that's great for him and his family, but that's just not my thing. And it was the Google search that told me something's off with his last name. Yeah. So Google search is great. The other sites that I'm going to give you, some of them cost a few bucks. Some of them you can buy a subscription to. Some of them are free. Some of them are pay per page if you want to download some criminal records, for example. And I'm just going to walk through them, and I won't necessarily specify in each case what the cost is. But we're also going to post an article to kslnewsradio.com, which Caitlyn and I work for KSL News Radio in Salt Lake City. So we'll make sure we post an article to kslnewsradio.com so you can go on that page and you can print out, save, cut and paste, whatever you want to do with these websites we're going to link to. And again, these are suggestions. I'm not endorsing any of these sites. Personally, these are the ones I've used. There are many other people who use other sites and apps. These are what have worked for me. Okay, so we've already talked about Google. I also want to note Google Images.
Oh, yeah. I forget about this tool.
So Google Images, again, another free search. So somebody sends you a photo of themselves, a man, or you download it from the dating app onto your phone, and there's that little camera in the search bar on Google. It's there for a reason. It's not just like Google spying on you. That's not what that is. That is a camera that you can then upload that photo to and run it through Google. And what I have been able to find in the past is that in that image that I've downloaded, not often, but sometimes will come up as belonging to somebody else. So it may be an indication that the image that they're using on the dating app or that they've texted to you is just an image they've grabbed from somebody else's profile. Maybe they've grabbed it off of a social media site, or they've just grabbed it off the web, and they're sending that to you, pretending like that's them. So I use Google. I use the Google image search. Again, That's free. Have you used that?
Yes, I have used it, and I originally learned about that because of the show Catfish, because they would do that when they were trying to find catfishes, and I just completely I feel like I forgot that it existed, and yes, it's a great reminder that is such an easy tool to use.
I'm going to give you an example of a story, an actual situation where a woman had reached out to me because she was desperate to find her boyfriend. They'd been dating for a while. She knew I was in the news business, and she was hopeful that I could find him. He just disappeared. She didn't know what to make of it. So I always ask for as much information as I can about the person when I'm searching them. So I asked for his full name as far as she knew, his date of birth. This is really important. It's really hard to compare somebody to a court case if you don't have their full name, right? Hopefully a middle name or a middle initial, so you make sure you're looking at the right person. Did I always say date of birth? Date of birth, super important. And if not a date of birth, at least an age.
Yeah.
Date of birth is a great thing to have, though, because then you're 99.9% sure you're looking at the same person.
How would you, I guess you could get their age from a dating app, but how would you casually bring that up? How would you figure
When's your birthday? Well, for example,
okay.
Facebook.
Yeah,
you can look up a lot of people,
and
a lot of people post their birth
honest.
date. Yeah, if they're honest on Facebook. But I would ask, when's your birthday?
Yeah, that's a good easy icebreaker. Okay.
And if they're honest on the dating app, of course, if
yeah,
you'll have their age. But a lot of times in conversation, these are the kind of things that I might be asking in the beginning. Oh, I was born in this year. When what year were you born?
Definitely adding it to my list of opening questions. When's your birthday? Because I don't think I've ever asked that before in a first engagement or a meeting or something like that.
Yeah, what year were you born?
Just slide it in there.
Or where were you born? Because that actually plays into it as well. You have to know where they've spent a significant amount of time in their life, because if you're interested in doing a DIY background check on them, it doesn't do you a lot of good to search a database in one state if they have spent the majority of their life 5 states over, because state court databases aren't merged. They're not one big data, and we'll get more into that later. You have to go in and search. So if he's grown up in Missouri, but now living in Texas, and you're dating him, well, you have to know that he grew up in Missouri and he was there until he was 25. So you can look at Missouri records for, anything prior to when he moved to Texas. So this woman reaches out to me and, again, can't figure out where her boyfriend is. So I have her send me as much defining information about him as possible. The first thing I did was, what you and your, would you call it, the investigative friends unit did? I Googled his name.
Yeah.
Okay. So when we're sort of in the heat of this and we're scared and we're nervous and we don't know what's going on, we tend to overlook the obvious. That's just so it was good, I think, that she reached out to somebody who could be a set of eyes and ears for her, because she didn't think to even Google his name. She's just in the throes of distress. She can't figure out, is he deceased? Is he ghosting her? Did he break up with her, not tell her? So she is really concerned about this. So I Google him, and immediately his name pops up under a jail database. Okay, so that's an important point. It immediately pops up under a jail database. Most people don't realize, and you would have no reason to realize this because you've never had to worry about jail and arrest and all that other stuff. So no judgment. Most people don't realize that jail databases are free to search and they're public. So from there, I jump into the jail database and try to figure out when this guy was locked up. Well, he's on the database, so he's still in jail, right? Because usually it's like that they're not in jail anymore. If they've been bailed out or they've been released under whatever circumstance, they're not going to show up on this searchable database anymore. So he's still in jail. Well, they say right there on the database why he was arrested. He was arrested for DUI. Okay, driving under the influence on a road in Utah. Well, now I'm getting somewhere. Okay, so now I found her boyfriend. I know why he hasn't called her in 2 weeks. He's been locked up. Well, she doesn't know this, right, yet. I want to do more background research for her because I know from talking to her she has children. And so I'm thinking, well, if he's DUI, obviously she's going to be worried about her kids' safety and her and all that. So I go to then, and again, this is important. In some states, it costs money to do this. In some states, you have to set up an account to do it. So you have to give them an email. But I go to the state court database. I log into that in Utah. And in Utah, we have a database. It's called Exchange without an E in the beginning. I don't know why they spell it that way. It's like Exchange. And this does cost $5 to search, and you get a couple of searches for $5. And then it's a few cents, 50 cents or something like that, if you want to download documents. It's open to the public once you pay that fee. And other states, I know from my research, I know from doing this for a living, and I know from talking to other people on social media, other states have state court databases that are open for public search. In fact, I just searched one database in another state for a friend of mine, and it was a free search. So states offer this. It was easy. She just didn't know where to begin, so I was like, I'll help you. And I found the document I was looking for, and I sent it to her, and it was for somebody that she was starting to see to date. So then for this gal back in Utah to the DUI guy that was locked up in jail, I go on to the Exchange database, not knowing if I would find anything on this guy. And it turns out that he had a history of drug dealing. So now we have a guy that's been locked up for a couple of weeks with a past criminal history of drug dealing. Now, I'm a mom of 3 kids, grown kids. I can tell you that this is probably not the kind of person that I'm going to bring through the door at the barbecue and say, meet your future stepdad. So he may, maybe he's reformed from drug dealing, but now he's in jail on DUI.
Just got a DUI.
He just got a DUI. Red flag. Yeah. Red flag. So just those 3 searches alone gave me a whole lot of information about this individual and probably saved her maybe from just a world of heartache.
Yeah, and just because I've used Exchange. I know of it because of my job, but I did not know about that website before I started working here in the news business. And I use it all the time, just not even just for dating experiences, but just for people that I am questioning, what's going on with a lot of stuff. And it is $5 gets you a lot of stuff that you need. And
what's your time worth and your emotions worth? $5?
It's worth $20 if you really got to search. No, it's $5. I've used it. I've used it recently, and I just think, it can be kind of addicting once you get in there and you realize that's a resource because you can, if people are being sketchy, it's all right in front of you in that database.
Let me tell you what else you can find in these state court databases. Now, at this point, I want to make it clear. There's also a federal district court database. These two are not merged. There are federal crimes. There are federal cases that live on the federal court database. So if you're looking for bankruptcy records, that's where I'm going to send you in a bit, okay? So let's set that aside. But I want to get back to state courts and why these are so great, I think, for our DIY background checks for dating is because they offer so much information, not only criminal records. You can go in there and see if somebody has a pattern of not paying their credit cards. So debt collections. Now, just personally, this is my own personal point of view. If somebody misses 1 or 2 payments and it goes to a debt collection, it ends up being filed in court. I mean, okay, at my age, maybe if they're in their early 20s or something, we can kind of look past some of that. But what this will show is when you pull up, the guy you're dating, his name, and 30 debt collections come up, right? And there's just this pattern of not paying. Liens is another one. So if he or she, if you're dating, they're not paying their taxes. This is significant because if you were going to enter, like if you wanted to buy a home together, I'm not saying that, I'm not advising that. That's not, but but a lot of people talking about that, you would want to know before you got down the road on that at all. Like, what's their lien history? Like, do they not paying state income taxes? And that's where you're going to find that.
Is that a website?
That's on this exchange. That's
it's
on the
exchange.
state court.
Okay, I've never heard that word before. So you're teaching me something.
So like a tax lien would be like, you own a home, you never pay your property taxes.
Okay.
A lot of people, that's collected through their mortgages, but for whatever reason, something happens, or there's all kinds of different liens. Maybe you don't pay state income tax. You're a 1099 employee, you don't pay state income tax, you let that go for 3 or 4 years, and suddenly you owe the state thousands of dollars a year. And then you're just somebody's in this cycle of going to court over liens. It just will show you a pattern.
Okay.
Of
I had
financial
no idea what
issues.
that was. I was like, you're teaching me something here
Oh,
to
that's
look,
great.
something
Stop
to look
me
for.
because when this becomes like drinking a cup of coffee is to me every morning, this stuff, it's like sometimes I start using words, and honestly, this is all stuff I had to learn too,
naive.
Caitlyn.
I'm learning. I don't even know what to look for.
We all
Yeah.
learn. There's so much to know, and it's too bad. This makes me feel sad that dating has become
It is
complicated.
sad, but it's important to know. And you don't have to become obsessive. You can with these websites, but it is a good tool. If you're curious about someone, or even if you're just going on a date with someone for the first time and you're nervous about getting out there, it's okay to know some things. And people have pasts. Like, the past is in the past, but if there's a pattern and a trend, and it's something very significant, you may want to, think twice about something.
In my experience, people, and this is through, doing interviews with people as a professional journalist and also in dating, people want to minimize the bad stuff in their background. So, if they say, oh, I missed paying my taxes last year, my negative, Debbie Downer's mind goes to, it's probably more like 2 or 3 years. If they admit to one, there's probably more. The other thing state court databases will do, and this is a biggie for women my age. My friends have been dealing with this. This is a regular conversation when we go out to dinner. Are they really divorced?
So that I was going to say, I've looked up people and realized that they were married and now divorced. I didn't know they were married at all. So it's just like,
oh, they kept that from you.
I'm not someone that I was dating, but I've investigated people, and it's something I surprisingly found. And so now I'm like, okay, I can always look this up, and I can know if they have, a custody agreement with kids or something like that. So
right, which is a big deal.
It's stuff to know, and you just they should tell you this stuff anyways. If you're dating them, shouldn't have to, figure it out and throw it in their face like, hey, I saw this. They should bring it up to you. But, if it's something that comes up, it comes up, and you just, know what you're getting into a little bit.
And we can talk more about, do you have that awkward conversation with them?
Yeah.
Look what I found while doing my DIY background checks that I heard about on Dating at Her Age.
Is this the second date conversation?
How does that look? And how does that work? And I've had moments when I have talked it out with men, but I've already made my decision.
But you should give them you can bring it up casually.
Yeah,
should you bring do you have any histories? Casually let them tell you instead of just, attacking them with it.
Right. Well, we'll get to that in just a bit. But let's talk about divorce records, because unfortunately what I have found on dating apps, and it's not just on dating apps. I want to make this clear. When we're introduced through friends of friends of friends, oh, he's the best guy in the world. You'll love him. He's got a great history. He's a super good guy. And I ask him, well, is he divorced? Yeah, he's been divorced. But then things come up in the conversation on the first or second day. I was like, I'm not really sure he's divorced.
Like, actually, it's not signed and filed.
Yeah, they might be in the process. They might have talked about it. But I have felt like men have overpromise the fact that their divorce is in the rearview mirror, you know, and I don't want to be involved in any of that. There's a lot that goes, this is another episode of our podcast, so I don't want to get off on too much of a tangent. To me, there is a lot that goes into post-divorce recovery and counseling and working through, you know, whatever issues you took away from the marriage, however you want, you know, what you visualize for your future self, that trying to date somebody without, you know, and lying to them about being divorced while you're going through a divorce is you've got a lot of work to do.
Soon.
Plus, you're still in a marriage, dude.
Yeah.
And I'm not interested at all. That gives me the creeps. I do not want to be a party to that. So I have made it a priority that I go onto these state court databases and search their name to see if they're actually divorced. And I'll be honest, if their name does not pop up, the first thing I do not think of is, oh, I searched his name wrong. I have made it a habit to say to myself, assume that now that he is not divorced.
Yeah, you did the one step. You don't have to do another. That
right.
Totally works.
Yeah, he's not divorced. He's not divorced. His name would be popping up here. And if they're in the process of getting a divorce, it should have already been filed. It should have been filed, and then the process goes on. Sometimes that process is a matter of months. Sometimes it's a matter of years. But there's something on the court docket that has his name attached to it. If it's been finalized, sometimes these divorce records will be public. So you can actually see, if you really want to know, what the divorce settlement looks like. And this might help with decisions like, maybe he's said, oh, I'm paying, you know, $2,000 a month in alimony. But you go on to the divorce records, you go in there and you see he's paying $5,000. Well, that might be a big game changer for your financial future together. I had a man I was on a date with tell me that his ex-wife was lazy, that she didn't work, that he couldn't get her to work, made her sound like that she was, it's like a freeloader. So I researched it. I mean, that was a red flag for me. Anybody who's complaining about their ex the way he was complaining, I was like, Mom, maybe she's not the problem. And I look up their divorce records, and I find this woman is a successful, highly paid corporate executive, and he was not working for many years, according to the divorce decree. So the story he was giving me
was telling you about himself.
What
kind of
wasn't what was in the divorce decree. It didn't match. So that concerned me, and I thought, no, there's not going to be another date. So that's really where you get a lot of information about somebody's background from state courts. And again, if they're divorcing in Florida, or they're divorcing in Mississippi, and they're divorcing in California or whatever, you're not going to find their divorce records in Utah.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, it's just, you have to go to the state where they've filed for divorce.
So we talked about the sex offender registry, and I want to know how to find more information about that besides just using Google.
Okay, let's talk about it next. So in a second, I'm going to give you more information, Caitlyn, about sex offender registries, because you had that experience using Google to track down a man who was a sex offender. But there are other websites you can use, and also other searches that you can do to figure out if somebody has spent time in prison. But before we get there, you wanted to ask a few questions about searching court records that were curious to you.
Yeah. So, I mean, Utah, because I've done it before, it's fairly simple. You just go to the Utah State Court website, and you can see exchange. You figure it out. You pay the $5. But, like, is it that simple for other states, or how do you go, no, you're on the right place?
Well, one of the things that I do is a lot of times the states will have state websites, and I'll go to that website, and they'll give you multiple different, websites you can search under that state database or website. So every state usually has a website, and it'll say, like, search the courts here. So I just recently did a search, I said just a few minutes ago, for somebody was starting to date and wanted to know if the guy that she was dating had any sort of criminal background that I could find. Again, this is I'm not a private investigator, right? I don't have the same fancy schmancy databases that some of these police officers are able to use, but I can use public sites. And I searched in other states. I Googled it. I searched the states court database. It was very user-friendly. I thought it was one of the most user-friendly databases for free. It was free. And it didn't show that he had any criminal background that was of concern. So a lot of states will, there's different websites in different states. But what we'll do for our KSLNewsRadio.com article is we'll compile some links to different states. And then it just becomes an issue of trial and error.
Yeah.
Really, to do it. And some of them will have tutorials. Maybe, you Google a blog or something like that, and you can figure out how to use it, how to do the searches. But some of this just becomes about, trial and error in terms of the searches. What you don't want to do, though, is... This is just, when I do searches, you may be careful. It's totally get the wrong person.
Yeah, and that's...
Jump to conclusions,
yeah.
Right? So that's why it's important to know their full name, middle name, kind of where they've grown up, and date of birth.
Double check and make sure it's who you're actually looking for. Because I get that, and people can have different last names if they've been married and stuff like that. I've experienced that myself, and I'm like, I didn't realize that it was a different name that they were having. It takes so long sometimes to piece it all together, that the different things under their record, that's because they have 3 different names and it's the same person. You realize at the end, this is just something I've experienced. So it can be a work in progress, but it takes time. So.
And if you feel like there's something off, like I said, your gut is free to listen to, talk to a friend, see what their reaction is. If you want to hire a private investigator who can do these searches, it's going to cost some money. These, they don't work for free, but that may be worth an investment to you. And then some people look at me or say, well, this is way too much effort. I'm exhausted. Why are you even dating?
Exactly.
I'm exhausted just thinking about all of this.
It is important, I think so.
Well, what has saved me a lot of agony is recognizing that I need to do these up front. Yeah. As opposed to when I
you don't have to get attached and then you don't have to rip it off. I have one more question, then we can move on. Do all jails have a database? Because I know in Carbon County every Monday they post the jail bookings, and I read my Monday misdemeanors.
In Carbon County, Utah,
every Monday we get our jail bookings. But I didn't realize that they don't do that in other places. At least when I've looked things up. Yeah. So, but just any jail.
Yeah. So, for example, in Utah, a good majority of the databases that I've had to search over the years are public, and most jails have them. I don't know about every state or what the state laws are regarding release of information. Some states won't allow the release of mugshots unless somebody's been convicted of a crime. So if you're thinking, I'm going to look at this person's photo and I'll be able to compare and see if it's the guy I'm dating or the gal I'm dating, some of that isn't available, or at least it's not available with an updated photo. So it depends on what state you're looking at. But I think if you feel funny about something and you feel like maybe they do have a criminal history and they're not telling me about it, and I feel like it's significant, I really love this person, I do want to, but I also recognize that there's a lot at stake here. Maybe you have kids, and so that increases the need to know what their background is. But I think it's important for all of us, to stay safe while dating. And I hate to say this, but unfortunately, this is the place that I have ended up in, to feel safe while dating or continuing to date.
Yeah, it definitely. If I were to, date way more frequently, I just think this is something I would do if I'm meeting a stranger every single time. I'll pay the $5 every time I go on a date. I don't care.
Yeah. So you had a story about Googling somebody that your friend felt uncomfortable about. She was dating him, and there was some just unusual activities that concerned you. And so you Google him and you find out
he's on he's a registered sex offender, and that's a that's a red flag. So, but it just came up by Google. And so I don't know if there's more to look into with that, because I think his charges weren't in Utah, if I'm remembering correctly. So we just found it through other
through Google search
articles and stuff like that. So
yeah, that's Google search will lead you to news articles sometimes with somebody's name in it. It'll lead you to other websites, and so that's a great place to start. There's also a national sex offender database. And so what the National Sex Offender Database does is it brings together all of the sex offender registries across the United States, and each state will have a sex offender registry. I always do a search in both. Again, know where they live, right? Where do they possibly commit the crime? But I also use the National Sex Offender Registry, and just in case something didn't get merged, I will also search the state's sex offender database. Now, from using Utah's forever, I do know you have to promise, when you click on it, that you're not going to use this to, for any other reason, like other than, for personal information. So I know there's other websites out there that will, post sex offender information. I like to go right to the source, and that's the National Sex Offender Registry and also the state sex offender registry. What this will tell you is a lot of information, about, where they live. So they have to register an address. And if they move, they have to register their new address. What the category is of person that they committed the offense against. Was it a child? Was it an adult? And you'll just get a ton of information by just looking up these databases.
I think this was a real eye-opener for us because, my friend, myself, all of us are not interested in dating registered sex offenders. But say they're not a registered sex offender, what are the other options to look for?
So you think you're fearful that maybe they committed another crime.
Yeah, so how do I figure that out?
Yeah, and the sex offender registry makes that kind of convenient when you're doing searches for sex offenders. But you're right, there are a lot of other crimes that happen. And there are different avenues that you can find people, and depending on what crimes they commit. So we talked a lot about searching jail records, county jail records online. A lot of those, of course, you can search while they're booked in jail to find somebody, perhaps. So the other way, Caitlyn, is to think of it this way. There are really three paths, if you will, three different types of levels or facilities, government facilities that will house prisoners or inmates. One would be those jails we talked about at the county level. Most of them are county that I'm aware of. Maybe there's occasionally some city jails, but most of them are county. So you can Google the county where they're in, see what the jail is, see if there's a searchable database. So you can look at jail databases. But there's another step in this, in our criminal justice system as well, is oftentimes, when people are convicted, they might be held in jail while they're awaiting trial. They may be booked in temporarily and then released and then been told, they can be out on their own, and then they have to, and then come back and appear in court. But once and if they're convicted in state court for a crime that they committed, they'll be, quite frequently sentenced to prison. And that is going to be a state prison. And then additionally, there are federal prisons as well. Totally different system than the state system. So
that's good to know. Sometimes when you just hear prison, you just think, oh, prison. You don't really think all of the difference of state and federal.
And it can get really complicated if you're trying to search for information about somebody, if you don't know all of this. So there's the jail, which are county jails. There are state prisons, which are, sometimes referred to as like the Department of Corrections. And then there are federal prisons. And I'm going to get into those in just a minute, because that database is, I think, a really great in-depth database because it goes back for decades. But let me focus just for a minute on state prisons. So when somebody goes to prison, let's say they're sentenced to, 5 years to life. And in some states it's called an indeterminate sentence. So 5 years to life. And they go before the parole board, and after 5 years, they're paroled. Okay, which means they're still in the custody, so to speak, of the state, right? They're not free like you and I would be free, but they're allowed to go live out their sentence in the community. But they're living under restrictions, and they're on what's called parole. And they have to report to a parole officer. And anyway, they have to, follow the rules that are spelled out for them to follow. So they're not free. So if you're meeting somebody and you don't know he's on parole, mm-hmm. and we always talk about, men on parole. It could be men listening to this podcast who are dating women. I mean, it's the same thing applies, right? You don't know that they're on parole. How does that fit into your life? What are those restrictions?
Yeah.
What was his or her crime? Are they allowed to travel? They may not be. Mm-hmm. Are they allowed to leave the country? Like you want to go to Europe and he can't go? Well, maybe that's why. How often does he have to check in with his parole officer? There are a lot of restrictions, and they're all different depending on the inmate. But my point to saying all this is that the Department of Corrections websites, in my experience when I search them, is it will not only tell you, oh, well, there's somebody who is currently in prison, which you're like, well, I'm not dating somebody who's currently behind bars because I'm not dating somebody who's currently behind bars. It will also tell you, it will reveal to you, like if the person's name you've put in is on parole.
That's good to know. I didn't know that.
And that is not that they're like parole. I think might be some misperceptions just in my experience as a reporter that parole is, they're free. That's not the same freedoms that you have. So if you're meeting somebody who is a parolee and on parole and they haven't shared that with you, it's obviously information that you're probably going to want to know about, but it might also shape mm-hmm. how your dating life goes.
Yeah, that's actually a big thing. I've never thought about that before.
The reason I think about this is not only for my dating life, but I've also done stories over the years mm-hmm. on women who have unknowingly and unwittingly connected with men who are on parole. They don't share this information. It's not something they tell them about. And that's, obviously information that they would want to know about. So again, that's just another database that you can go to and search.
Which one is that for?
So that would be for like the Department of Corrections. So you have jails,
the state prison.
Right. So you have jails at the county level or jails. At the state level, or they're usually referred to as like the Department of Corrections, and they have databases where you can search. Those are free. My experience is those are free searches. Mm-hmm. And now let's talk about federal prisons. The other option is, and this again is a free search, the Federal Bureau of Prisons in the United States has a database search. And the great thing about this search is the records go back to 1982. So if somebody served prison time in the federal system, okay, this isn't not a county jail, this is the federal system has its own prisons. And you put their name in, it has to be their full name. It will tell you if they've ever been housed in a federal prison. So even if they've committed a crime back in 1986 and they were sentenced to, federal prison, their name should still be in that database. Now you're like, well, I'm not going to be dating federal prisoners. Well,
you might not know that.
Yeah.
You've been across the table from some prisoners, as we've talked about.
Yeah. I mean, not only in my dating life, but also professionally. And you don't always know that somebody has a dark past. Mm-hmm. But if they've gone to federal prison, and this isn't necessarily like every single person that serves time in prison, but to land in federal prison it's a pretty significant crime that might have taken a grand jury indictment to get them there. They've been prosecuted by the U.S. Attorney's Office, maybe even like the FBI or, maybe the IRS for not paying, taxes for years and years and years. So the Federal Bureau of Prisons I think it's a great resource to look up somebody's background.
Say I'm concerned about someone's financial history. How would I find out if someone has a history of bankruptcies?
That's where you want to go to the federal court website, PACER. Yeah, spelled just like it sounds, PACER. And you'll be able to find not only federal criminal records there. So if they've committed one of those crimes that have landed them in federal prison, you can find it there. And then you can read all about it. You can usually read an indictment, you can read a criminal complaint, you can figure out more from using that website for that. Additionally, what PACER offers is bankruptcy records. So when you file for bankruptcy, you file for bankruptcy in federal court. And what I have been able to glean from reading bankruptcy records is, is there a pattern? Right? Is it one bankruptcy? Is it two bankruptcies? Is it a bankruptcy every 5 years? I can also tell, believe it or not, if you start to read through the bankruptcy filing, you can tell things about maybe how they've conducted their lives, in terms of how they use credit, how maybe they don't pay their bills. Did they get into debt because they had some sort of catastrophic medical situation? And so that's going to be, to me, in my view, that's going to be different than somebody who has had to file for bankruptcy because they've put $200,000 on credit cards for new clothes and couches, and meals out. And then you can also see how the bankruptcy was discharged. So, okay, are they, what does their financial picture look like? And you can also tell from bankruptcy records, what I've been able to tell, at least I should say specifically from bankruptcy records I've had to read in the past is, what does their job history look like? Because they'll have to include some of that in the bankruptcy filings, and they'll have to sort of spell out what happened in their job. Did they resign? Did they get fired? I mean, was there something that were they laid off? And that can just give you little nuanced bits of information that might help you piece together whether this person you're dating is financially making good financial decisions.
Yeah, I personally didn't even know that there was a separate place to go look for these. I thought that they would all just come on the state website.
Those are state websites are great to find out if there's been debt collections on credit cards.
Okay, but not bankruptcies.
Or like I said, tax liens from the state. Or from the county not paying county taxes, where people think that information they think they're going to get from the federal court database, PACER, where you're going to go to look for bankruptcy records, is, I want to know if they haven't paid the IRS, if they haven't paid their federal taxes. Now, somebody listening to this might be able to give us more information. As a journalist and as somebody who's searched PACER in the past, just, for dating and whatever reason I needed to search PACER, I have never been able to find IRS records. These are private. It's not something the IRS slaps on a website, so you can go back through and piece through somebody's, whether they filed or not, or how much they've made. So I have just put that out of my mind in terms of being able to track that down. Now, I will say what could be a clue, and has been a clue for me in the past, is by, again, jumping back, going to state court databases. If there's tax liens filed because they haven't paid income taxes to the state, it's not a guarantee they haven't paid income taxes federally, but it might offer a clue to you. Oh, okay. They didn't pay state income tax. The state's trying to collect. That is, public record, at least in the records I've searched. Maybe that could be a clue that they haven't also paid the IRS. I kind of glossed over this, and I didn't mean to, because I think this is a really important part of dating, at least in my dating life. a lot of men I've dated have kids, and they're divorced, and there was some sort of custody arrangement and also child support arrangement. I'm a firm believer that people should pay for their children.
Yeah.
That would not match my vibe at all if I found out somebody had just made a decision to not pay child support. And again, some of these records might be private, like they might be sealed or whatever for protection of the child. But in some cases, I've been able to find, back child support that hasn't been paid, or child support collections when I've done stories and when I've done research on the state court databases. So you might be able to get a clue as to whether they're behind in child support. And that may matter to you.
That really matters, actually.
I think
even at my age. People, I'm 29, 30. A lot of people I know are maybe divorced and have kids or in the process of that, that I could be dating. And you just need to know if they're not upfront with you about it. Like I keep saying that, don't be crazy. But you can be a little crazy if you need to be. But, you want to know what you're getting into. If that money is tied to them, it could be tied to you if you eventually, move forward with things.
I also look at the messiness of something like that and have to ask myself, is that something that I want to find myself potentially in the middle of? Is that something that how will the kids feel about this?
Yeah.
Too, if I'm swooping into the picture and they've got, dad's not paying, and that.
Yeah.
So what I glean from these searches isn't just like, oh, gotcha.
Yeah.
See, you committed this crime in 1992, and now here I am at a coffee date. I'm going to hold you accountable. That's not it. That is not my purpose for doing this. My purpose is to protect my peace and to make sure I'm not getting myself into something that there's no way I belong in that. I'm sure you feel the same way about it. It's like there's no way I belong in the middle of some sort of a court battle involving kids, or you haven't gotten divorced yet, but you said you're divorced and you haven't even filed yet, or you filed and you're still going back and forth in the beginning stages of a divorce, or you just got sprung from prison for a very significant crime, which, by the way, I was driving to a lunch to meet a guy that I'd met on a dating app, and I find out as I'm arriving, thanks to my, what did you say, the investigative friends unit?
Yeah. I guess
thanks
that's
to
what
my
it's
own
called now.
surveillance squad, that he had served 2 stints in prison for fraud. So I'm like, well, now I'm just curious to know what his story is going to be. And of course, he didn't bring it up, and I wasn't interested in, interrogating him over this. It was just like, it's a one and done date anyway. But that was an hour of my life that I'll never get back.
Well, but you figured it out before you got too far into it. That's what I think is important here. So
I think this really comes down to this: being aware, making sure we're staying safe. We're not getting involved with people that have significant criminal histories or financial histories that could really interfere with our future goals. And if people aren't being upfront with that, in my experience, and this is just my experience, many people will want to minimize bad things in their background. And I try to understand that, but I also don't want to be a part of that.
Right.
So if somebody's going to minimize how many wives they've had, but I'm still coming into the relationship thinking you've had one ex-wife, and now you tell me, now I find out from a database search you've got 3. You said you had 3 kids. Now I find out you have 4. Oh, wait, no,
Why
5.
Are you lying? That's the pattern is what matters here.
The pattern.
Because we can forgive some, well, not all, but some things that are in the past. Like I said, they're in the past. But if you continue to do those things and it's just you're not in good terms with the law, we've got a problem, because I'm not that type of person. So.
And for people who are on that side of, I'm going to minimize, he will never find out. There's no way. They'll know. I'll make it up. I'll just keep this a secret. I'll sweep this under the rug. Don't do that. If you can help yourself, don't do that.
Yeah.
Tell the truth.
Own it.
I would much rather know you've got 3 marriages than find out randomly 6 months after we start dating that you forgot to tell me about 2 when we first met.
It's not a good look.
It's not a good look.
I say this all the time. Just be upfront and transparent, because it's going to just like make things so much easier down the road. And that means it's going to open up the trust at the beginning of a relationship. Even if you're just dating, it's like, oh, he told me that. And it clears. It's everything he said was real. So now I actually think that he's, has some self-awareness and can hold himself accountable for whatever it is. And that is a good sign. But you can make the decision if you want to be tied up in whatever that is. But that's a step forward on like, okay, someone can better themselves, change. I'm talking about crimes, not divorce, whatever. But like, they can move forward and try to be better and not have the same patterns. Maybe if they're putting it out, if you're laying it out, it makes it seem like it might be progress for change. I shouldn't just put false hope out there if that's not, I don't know, but that's how I would take it. So next, I want to ask you how you confront this, and let's just go over I have a lot of final takeaways from this conversation, so let's get into that next. So with all of this, you've obviously had to confront men that you were pursuing about some things like this with situations you found.
Mm-hmm.
How do you confront that?
Well, first of all, I want to make sure that I'm going to be safe, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's important for anybody who is following up with information they found. The other thing that's really important is making sure I know the answers before I ask the questions, which does sound a little like
Gotcha.
detective-esque.
Yeah.
But, at this point, I've pretty much figured out that, information that they've shared with me while we were dating is inaccurate, whatever that information is. Whether that is they have a criminal history that they didn't share with me, they're not divorced. That is a huge one. That is probably one of the biggest things that I see on dating apps or guys that I'm being connected with is like they're not divorced. This is how I would play it. And I have done it in person before, and I wouldn't do it again. And it's just like I've remained calm. I wouldn't do it that way again. I would just make a phone call. By the time I'm making that phone call, I have already know that it's not going to work out. I mean, we're not going to work through this. The fact that, you've been involved in some horrible crime in your past. I mean, that's just not going to, whatever the case may be, or that you have so much debt. I could work for the rest of my life and not be able to help you with this because you haven't cured the root of the issue, which is spending problems or, work-related issues that you haven't addressed over the years. So I know going into that conversation that this is a breakup phone call. This is hey, look, I just got uncomfortable about some of the stories that you were telling me. Or in some cases, I've heard conversations at events I've gone to. Like that's another important key thing is listen to what people are telling you or listen to conversations that are happening around you, whether that's with friends or family, and they're saying things like that just seem like, okay, there's something going on here that I'm not familiar with. And I'm just having basically the breakup phone call. I might not tell them everything I know, but hey, look, there's just some concerns that I have. I wasn't 100% convinced that you were divorced, or I found out you've had 3 marriages instead of 1. That's really not, I don't see myself in a situation where there's 3 ex-wives involved. I'm sure there's somebody out there for you that has a different viewpoint on that. But if I ever have to do this again, and trust me, Caitlyn, I pray I don't, I would make it a phone call.
Yeah.
And I feel like a phone call is better than a text. Because at this point, now they've invested time in the relationship, right? If it's just one date and you're done, you don't know. I don't feel like I owe them an explanation. Yeah. But if it has been like we've been dating for several dates, I'm recognizing that there's some real issues here that just are not going to vibe with where I'm going with my life, then I'll make it a phone call. And and sometimes I'll make a choice not to share it with them. You know, I don't need to play, Columbo over here. Like, I'm not, I'm not like, I don't need my Perry Mason moment with a guy. But if they want to know, or if it's significant enough, like, hey, you're still married. I'm not interested in dating somebody who's still married, and I made that clear. So the fact that you're still married, you got a lot to work through. I'm not going to be a part of that, but you should know that I know you're still married.
Yeah.
And other women will probably find this information out too, because guess what? It's public record. We can find this stuff, and women do this now, or men do this now, because we're concerned about who we're getting wrapped up with. So I would make it a phone call. I would keep it brief. I would keep it to the point. But I know going into that conversation that it's over.
Yeah. Well, what I was going to say is, like, I don't think you even have to be like, say, I found this, this, and this, unless it's something significant like that.
Oh, yeah. No, you don't need to roll out their rap sheet. They know their rap sheet, Caitlyn,
right,
and that's another thing, right? They know. They know what they've kept from you. So I don't feel like I need to call him back. I know I was dating one guy. I went out with one guy once, and I knew there was something, I could tell there's something significant in his background, right? And he wanted to know if we could go on a second date. And I just said something like, I'm not feeling the connection that I'm looking for. I didn't lay out his rap sheet.
Yeah, no, that's fine. Yeah. That makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah. But I think if you felt like you were getting caught in something like, a relationship where he's not single yet, or there's something, and, that just doesn't vibe with you, and it has been a number of dates, like it's not just one or two dates, I wouldn't be afraid to have that conversation with him. But I would definitely, I want to reiterate, I know I said it 4 or 5 times, do it by phone.
Yeah.
Do it by phone.
Safety matters.
Not by text.
Yeah.
That's not in person. Just do it by phone. But again, everybody's different. That's how I would do it.
Yeah. No, that makes sense. I was just curious because you figured that out. You're scared after a minute. You don't know how to confront that. And so
it's upsetting.
It is. Yeah.
Quite frankly, I mean, there's been times when, we kind of act like this is, detective work, and it's behind the scenes thrills, looking up and like,
right.
Look what I found.
But then you find something that's really heartbreaking sometimes.
I've cried over it.
Yeah.
I shake sometimes, just in terms of like an adrenaline, like I'm so sad. I'm like, I cannot believe that I didn't know this. What is it that I missed? What can I do better next time? Like, I don't want to spend this much time investing in somebody who's not being honest with me. And then that becomes a whole, self-analysis and making sure I'm being more self-aware.
But it's not your fault. It's their fault. But it comes back to you because it's like that's where you would get our guards, where we're like, I don't want to do that anymore because this one kind of burned me. And
this can also, I have had emotions from sadness to feeling foolish. That's a harsh one to digest. It's like, I feel foolish that I didn't recognize this, to, oh my goodness, thank goodness the universe protected me from investing any more time. So I go from foolish to gratitude, then self-awareness. It's all these different stages that I go through.
Stages of grief.
Then I delete the dating apps. I can't do this anymore. And then a month later I'm back on them. It's just a real roller coaster of emotions. And I don't think we talk enough about that. We talk so much about, make sure you're safe. Of course, important. Make sure you are trying to figure out their history. Of course, important. But then when we kind of brush aside is, make sure you show yourself grace.
Right. Show yourself grace. Yeah. Talk to someone about what just happened, because it's not your fault. Even though you'll feel that way, because it's like, I was so stupid not to see this. No, you didn't know what you were getting into. So.
Or I saw the red flags.
Yeah.
But I chose again
Delusion.
To ignore them, hoping that this time would be different.
We all do that because we don't want to believe there's red flags right in front of us. It's very common and it's unfortunate, but trust your gut. That's the biggest message, I think, today. Trust your gut.
Caitlyn, let's commit to a bonus episode on it, and I want to tackle a couple of different issues we didn't tackle with this episode on DIY background checks. Sites I use to verify somebody's telling me the truth about their name, right? Because I think that's so critical to make sure we know we're actually dating who they say they are. And then how do I know that they're actually living where they say they live? So I don't date out of state. That rhymes. I don't know why. That's just, it just rhymes. I don't date out of state. I don't want a long distance relationship. But I know from being on dating apps, there are plenty of people who pretend to live, in the area that I'm living in. And I'm not interested in that. So there are sites that I use to verify if they actually live where they say they live.
Very interested in that. I want to know more. So yes, let's do a bonus
Let's
episode.
do a bonus episode on those two issues, and then anything else that comes to mind between now and the time we record that bonus episode. But I hope you learned something today.
I've learned a lot.
Deb's DIY background
I'm processing
checks.
like in my mind. I'm just like, okay, you have a list of things that you need to swoop in the first interaction, whether it's on the dating app or if it's just texting or if it's your first date. Get their full name, verify it somehow. You should already have that if you're going on a date with them, but. And ask them when their birthday is. Ask them if they're a millennial. Ask them what year they were born. That's for me. Ask them, what era they grew up in. I'm just trying to think of how to casually slip that in because it isn't. That's like
and
stuff
where
that
they
you got
grew up.
and where they're from. That's good first date. This is good conversation starters too. Like it's helping.
Some of the ways I do this is I'll just say, for me, it's like. I know this is going to sound crazy, but I'm like, so are your parents still alive? I mean, it's just because we're all I'm getting close to 60, right?
Fine. Yeah.
So are your parents still alive? Or where do they live? And again, a casual way to slip in, what year did you graduate from high school?
And these are good questions that should just be good icebreakers anyways. So I think that it's great. And I learned this because I had someone in my neighborhood who there were some red flags that popped up. You know about the story. And I just never got his name. He talked to me all the time. He was like just super friendly guy. And then the cops came looking for him. And I was like, I don't know this guy's name. And my landlord wouldn't give it to me. And I was like, I'm next to a scary person and I don't know who he is. And I never really I kind of figured out his name, but I'm just like, there was a learning lesson. Like get at least a first name, figure something out there. But I just think just get that information because then if you need it, you have it and you don't have to you don't have to question it. So we've got your list of things to ask. You got Google. We've got Exchange for Utah, Exchange. And then we went over Pacer.
Yes.
Which is, remind me?
The federal government website for federal cases.
Okay.
So that would be for bankruptcies and federal crime. So all of these sites, all these court databases have their different uses. I say just use as many as you can.
Yeah.
I also want to make it really clear. So, again, we're going to put this on all these sites on kslnewsradio.com. Please don't ever let anybody, Caitlyn, tell you you're crazy for doing this.
Yeah, I agree.
People have said things to me. They've rolled their eyes at me. They've questioned why I do this. And there's room for self-doubt. Like, am I being over the top? Am I being too crazy about this? The relationship that you get into with whoever you get into a relationship with will be the most significant relationship of your life.
You're talking about a life partner. Like, you got to be careful about that. I don't think it's crazy. I think you could probably get obsessive over it. But once you do, like you said, you do your search. You don't know if it doesn't pull up.
This is your due diligence.
Yeah.
This isn't, playing gotcha. This is just doing your due diligence to protect your peace and to know what you're getting into.
Well, it's for your safety.
I kind of wish we would just have a QR code, right? That we
right. Here's my record.
And you can just QR code with your phone and then you're automatically, given all of the information that you need. More importantly, I wish people would just be honest and say, I made some mistakes in my background. And you can make the choice to stay or go. Here's what I've done to correct it. Here's how I've changed. My experience has been that's unfortunately not what happens. But don't let somebody bully you into questioning why you're doing this. Your safety, that's why you're doing it. There's nothing more important than your safety. If you have kids, It's for your kids' safety. You're bringing this individual into your home. You're bringing them around your children. To me, as a mom, I know moms feel this way all the time. There's no greater role in my life than protecting my kids. And I certainly would not want to introduce them to my partner who has a history that you know is steeped in criminal behavior. And then also think about it from a financial perspective. You could lose everything because this person has decided not to tell you that they haven't paid their back taxes to the IRS, or they are steeped in bankruptcy, or they have so much credit card debt they don't know, they're up to their eyeballs. And then you're going out and you're combining checking accounts with them. You're combining savings accounts with them. Whatever choices that you're making, those would not be the choices that I would make. But whatever choices you're making, you're risking your finances as well and your financial health, which causes so much stress. So these are the things that come to mind when I say I do these criminal background checks and I do financial background checks to protect my peace, because it's much easier to protect my peace in the beginning than to unravel my way out of a mess like this.
No, I agree. I think that it's very important.
I also want to reiterate one thing that we said in the beginning: your gut.
Yeah.
Listen to your gut.
That's probably the first step that you take. So that's your signal to like maybe do it. But I have anxiety, so I never know what my gut is telling me. But yeah.
Well, let me tell you, Caitlyn, if you're on a coffee date and you're with a guy and somebody shows up to impound his car, follow your gut on that.
That's a little obvious. But I'm so naive sometimes. Like,
don't let him try to tell you that it was just a misunderstanding.
Yeah.
Okay?
Like, I don't know what's wrong. Like, sometimes I don't think I have a brain. Like, I think I've gotten better over the years. But no, like, I've just been like, oh, okay.
You're loving.
That's fine.
You're understanding. You want to believe
like,
people are good.
This can't be happening right in front of me right now. Like, that type of stuff. But I am like that. And I think I'm better now. It's because of you. You teach me things. You make me think of things to be aware of, because the world is scary. It's very scary, and I wish it wasn't like that.
But there is a balance between going over the top and rabbit holing your way down, all of the criminal records. Like, you do not need to be turned into an FBI agent to do this, and balancing believing that people are good, that people are genuine. But when you get burned enough, like I feel like I've been burned or made aware enough because of my job over the years, just doing investigative journalism, it does make you realize that you do need to do things to take measures to protect yourself. And I do DIY background checks now. Okay, bonus episode coming up.